The music industry is probably the most brutal thing that I could possibly think of. It's filled with a group of people who are completely passionate about the art that they create, counterbalanced by a group of business people who care nothing about the art that these people create.
Everyone thinks once you get signed, you're going to be made, and that's it. You know, you're like, oh, we're going to be signed, but we're just going to grow and get bigger and huge, and we're going to do this for the rest of our lives. It's going to be awesome.
Back in like the 60s and 70s, like major labels, they were more willing to sign interesting artists, you know, because there were less indie labels. It was all, you know, the major labels.
Independent labels are different, and independent labels are important because they almost take the mentality of what it was like in the early 60s, where you're basically generating a community or a theme.
Record labels have, over the years, gotten a bad rap for taking advantage of artists, and that's definitely something that happens, you know, way too frequently. I mean, that was part of why we started Royal Potato Family, is we wanted to have a label where, you know, we were accountable to the artists, and it's got to be straight up and honest.
It's a very, very long road. You're so broke and you're so exhausted for so long. It's like, it takes a lot, I think, to get past that point. And I don't even know when that starts, you know, because I never made it that far. I just bailed on high school, and I was in this band, and we were signed, and it was like a really big deal. And at this point, they already been signed. Their album was already out. It was released on Immortal Records like 3 months before this, so it was like a real thing. It was like my dream to do this.
In the history of recorded music, you know, labels would come in, they'd fund recordings, they'd hire publicists, they'd pay for photographers, they'd pay for packaging, they'd give bands tour support. That stuff is like pretty much all gone.
The label decides to send us like almost like a billing report to let us know how much money we owed them at the time, like somewhere between like $80,000 and $100,000. So they sent us this thing, and it says like we owed them $20,000 in tour support, which we never got. They said we owed them $60,000 to record the record, which is completely untrue because the band spent $2,000 of their own money 2 or 3 years before they even got signed to record the record themselves.
Large record labels are probably like the closest thing to the devil you could possibly imagine. They will wine and dine you, they will suck you in, they will have you sign a contract for 3 records, 4 records, and they will literally do everything to destroy your vision and facilitate their bottom line that they could possibly do. They basically own you.
It's just like anything nowadays, like politics or pharmaceuticals. Everything is so driven top down by corporations, and it's such an unlevel playing field.
We were like, all right, what if we bring all this stuff to them and say, hey, we can take you to court, but we won't if you let us do an album. Our lawyer sent them a thing saying, you're in breach of contract for all this stuff. We can take you to court, but we won't, as long as you give them a date saying, okay, we're going to give you this money, we're going to put you in the studio, and you can start recording on this day. In his statement, it was like, if you don't respond within 14 business days, we're going to void an album from the contract. The contract got voided, and it was like as if it never happened. And we didn't owe them anything, which is awesome, and we just never spoke to them again. Like that was it. They went bankrupt like within 6 months after that.
For artists today, it's more difficult for them because if they don't have the ability to generate a following for themselves, then nobody's willing to help them further their career.
I do need to see that there's like a touring base and that there is like somewhat of an existing fan base. It's hard to take something, you know, to just sign like a kid out of his bedroom who's made a really cool demo, you know.
Once the internet got involved with music, it basically allowed anybody in any part of the country to package their art and try to sell it to people without having to go through a label or any type of distribution network. It pretty much eradicated whatever business was attached to music.
It used to be that the Billboard 200 would account for the 200 best-selling albums. That's album sales, downloads, CDs, cassettes, you know, whatever, vinyl. But now they're factoring streaming into the chart. And it takes 1,500 streams to equal one album sale, which essentially comes out to like or $5.
It's not an ideal situation. You know, I think artists would prefer to be, you know, selling millions of physical copies of their albums and making more money. Someone's making money off of it, and it's not the artist. But, you know, Spotify's making money off of it, and Pandora's making money off of other people's music. So that's my biggest problem with it.
I think Spotify and Pandora are great for exposure for bands, especially smaller bands, because you can listen to Metallica anywhere. But if you've never heard of the band and you could listen to them on Spotify, then you decide if you want to buy the record, if you want to get the vinyl, or if you want to go and, you know, follow them on tour. And if they weren't on Spotify, you might not have discovered them. So I think exposure-wise, those sites are great. But I don't think anybody should put their music on Spotify or Pandora thinking they're going to make money from it.
Even though the industry is dying, there's more music now than there ever has been before, you know, or at least there's more available music.
Kids coming up now, like, they have access to everything, so they don't really fall in love with anything.
The easier it is for people to have access to stuff, the less they appreciate it. I think that vinyl is the saving grace of the music industry. You can't download it. You can't share it on the internet. Somebody has to make it and then sell it for you to have it. And in order to listen to it, you have to take it out and put it on the record player and listen to it.
There's a very lengthy process to making vinyl, between like making the masters, cutting the lacquers.
It just sounds better, so why wouldn't you want to hold the artwork and be able to hang it on your walls and actually, like, you know, it's more of an experience. You get to flip the record. It's like, it's not just hitting a button on your phone.
You wind up with this finished thing that's like just this great thing to hold. And
For someone who's still chasing that dream of playing in a band for your career, for your life, I would say to keep chasing it, but be smart about it and be realistic and understand that that once you get to that point that you think you want to get to, it's just, you're not even at the beginning.
We get probably 50 to 60 press releases a day from bands. You need to make an impression. And you need a publicist because most likely if you're in a band, you're like artistic and you shouldn't have to spend your time trying to promote yourself. That's not really what you're good at. You're good at making music.
artists need to be creating, and they need somebody to be facilitating the business side of it for them. You want artists like looking at the clouds and chasing butterflies and seeing colors. You know, like, you don't want them looking at royalty statements.
A true, authentic artist to me is someone who just makes music and they're proud of it. They're happy with it. Like, they created something and they're happy with it, no matter how many people heard it or how much money they made off of it. People, they always talk about the music industry like dying, but that doesn't mean that music is dying. You know, nobody's gonna ever stop making music because the industry is dying. Nobody really cares about that.
The community that keeps rock and roll music alive. The people who run the magazines, the people who own the record labels, the people who do independent things that are independent from the corporate monstrosity of the machine that's really just money hungry. Those are the things that will keep rock music alive. And I don't see that dying out anytime soon.